This is about chronic disease and its trillion-dollar cost. Hypertension. Chronic kidney disease. Metabolic syndrome. These aren't just medical terms, they're part of a silent crisis affecting more than half of Americans. And despite spending $4.5 trillion a year on healthcare, we're not getting healthier. In fact, we're getting sicker and faster than you think. 6 in 10 Americans have at least one chronic disease. 4 in 10 have 2 or more. And the leading causes? Not genetics. Not bad luck. Just 4 behaviors: smoking, poor nutrition, physical inactivity, and excessive alcohol use. These lifestyle choices are quietly driving conditions that don't just affect individuals, they burden entire healthcare systems. So, what exactly is a chronic disease? Broadly, it's any condition that lasts 1 year or more and either requires ongoing medical attention, limits your ability to carry out daily activities, or both. And while they don't always make headlines, these diseases shape the health and death of nations. But why is this such a big deal? Why are chronic diseases causing such a strain on our healthcare system and our economy? Well, the simple answer is that they're not just long-lasting, they're costly, in both dollars and lives. In fact, chronic diseases account for nearly 75% of the $4.5 trillion spent on healthcare in the US every year. This includes everything from medical visits to the cost of medications, surgeries, and even lost productivity from people who can't work because of illness. But here's the shocking part: many of these diseases are preventable. It all comes down to lifestyle choices like diet, exercise, and avoiding harmful habits. Yet, despite all the knowledge we have, millions still struggle to make these changes. Here we're going to look at the most common chronic diseases, how they affect people worldwide, and why some groups are more at risk than others. We'll break down the top diseases causing the most harm: hypertension, chronic kidney disease, and metabolic syndrome, and explore how we can take action to reduce the burden. Top 10 Chronic Diseases Global Burden. Let's start with the heavy hitters, the top 10 chronic diseases that account for the highest global burden. These are the conditions most likely to lead to disability, death, or both. 1. Cardiovascular diseases, still the #1 cause of death globally, including heart attacks and strokes. 2. Hypertension, a key driver of both heart disease and kidney failure. 3. Chronic respiratory diseases, like COPD and asthma. 4. Diabetes, especially type 2, which is closely linked to obesity and inactivity. 5. Chronic kidney disease, often goes undetected until late stages. 6. Cancer, a group of diseases with various causes, many linked to chronic inflammation and environmental exposures. 7. Alzheimer's and other dementias, increasing rapidly as populations age. 8. Depression and mental health disorders, often overlooked, but major contributors to global disability. 9. Liver disease, including fatty liver disease, increasingly tied to diet. 10. Osteoarthritis and musculoskeletal disorders, affecting mobility and quality of life. Based on data up to October 2024, the USA has particularly high rates of cardiometabolic conditions compared to many other high-income countries. Mental health disorders also represent a significant burden, with depression and anxiety affecting millions of Americans. This ranking reflects general prevalence patterns, though specific numbers may vary based on different data sources, definitions of chronic disease, and reporting. Let's talk about where it hits hardest. Because while chronic diseases are global, they don't impact every region equally. The United States compares badly to the global average and, more strikingly, to Northern Europe. Why is the US so much sicker? Here's the uncomfortable truth: Americans aren't just more likely to have chronic diseases, Americans are getting them younger, and living with them longer. Compared to countries in Northern Europe like Sweden, Norway, and the Netherlands, the US has dramatically higher rates of obesity, hypertension, and diabetes. These aren't just medical problems. They're signals of a society that's struggling to stay healthy. In Northern Europe, public health systems focus on prevention. In the US, disease is treated after it happens, and the price is paid in both money and lives. So while the global average is already concerning, America stands out for all the wrong reasons. USA versus Northern Europe, a chronic disease wake-up call. Let's talk numbers. When it comes to chronic disease, the United States isn't just falling behind, it's in a different league. Take hypertension. Nearly half of US adults have it, 45 to 50%. In Northern Europe, closer to 25 to 35%. Obesity, the US rate is 42%. In countries like Sweden and Finland, it's under 20%. That's more than double. And diabetes? Over 11% in the US, compared to just 5 to 7% in Northern Europe. Even heart disease and chronic kidney disease, conditions that are often preventable, are significantly more common in the US. Mental health disorders and respiratory diseases are slightly higher here, too. But the real standout: cardiometabolic diseases, hypertension, obesity, diabetes, the trio that drives up the risk of almost everything else. So what's going on? Why is the US so far off course? It comes down to prevention versus reaction. In Northern Europe, public health policies focus on healthy environments, early screening, and accessible care. In the US, healthcare often wait until things break and then try to fix them with expensive treatments. This isn't just data, it's a warning. Americans are living with more disease, at younger ages, and for longer. And the biggest gaps, like obesity, hypertension, and kidney disease, are all interconnected. Here's the bottom line: chronic diseases don't just affect people, they shape the health and death of entire nations. In the US, a staggering 90% of the US's $4.5 trillion in annual healthcare spending goes to treating people with chronic and mental health conditions. That's $4 trillion a year, not on cures, but on management, hospitalizations, medications, and emergency care that often comes too late. But it doesn't have to be this way. These conditions are preventable, treatable, and manageable. That's where public health comes in. What's coming next? In this series, we'll break down the biggest players in the chronic disease crisis, starting with two silent threats you may already be living with. 1. Metabolic syndrome and 2. Hypertension. What are they, why are they so dangerous, and what can you actually do about them? Subscribe, follow, and stay with us. Because understanding your health should be simple. It starts